Hello, everybody. I'm your host, Zenitsu, and you're listening to the Digi Talks podcast, the show that covers various topics from news to meta developments and everything in between for the fine folks who love the Digimon trading card game. Just as a quick reminder, I do stream these live over on twitch.tv/Zenitsu, and it also gets uploaded as a YouTube video under the YouTube channel of Zenitsu. Today, I'm with my co-host Teddy, and we're going to be talking about the BT12 Ultimate Cups as the next big events that are on the horizon. But first, we are going to be doing a little bit of a meta wrap-up or roundup, just because we do have more information as far as the competitive BT12, even though the competitive BT12 season is over. It isn't exactly over because a lot of this does translate to EX4 meta, and EX4 is kind of looking like BT12 2.0 with a couple of minor tweaks and changes to a couple of decks on top of just the new cards that are going to be introduced and the ban list taking into effect. So let's hop over and take a look at that data, because we got two events of data to cover. So the two events was the Top Cut and PPG. Top Cut was online, PPG was in person. PPG had about like 350 people, somewhere around there, and Top Cut had about 450 people.
Yeah, around that ballpark. I think it was like 350. It was in that ballpark. A little bit over 350. I know that.
Yeah. And before we go into like the nitty gritty of these events, I did add them to like my overall calculator for what the meta breakdown currently is. So as of right now, with those two events, there's only 13 viable decks in the BT12 meta. That is pretty short compared to other metas where we had like literally 15 to 21 or even 25 at one point. So it definitely is a very interesting meta to come into after coming off of such diverse metas back to back, even though people might hem and haw that Melga's metas were unhealthy. They actually weren't. Melga's dominance was way lower than Beelzemon's dominance, and the meta spread was way more diverse. And even Black War Greymon's meta was healthier than Beelzemon based on this data.
I was like, I mean, you can argue as much as you want, but numbers don't lie. So
yeah, so Beelzemon has about 44, the numbers say 42.5%. If I bother to use like the Latin American data that I had to throw out because that data was inconclusive and didn't match with the other stuff, and even if I added in some of like the pre-regional data, that would boost like Beelzemon up to like 45% representation, which is, again, the second unhealthiest format that we've had in the game. It's a little bit unfortunate that it comes now with such an accessible format, because you just buy the starter deck, buy a couple of upgrades, and then boom, you have literally a competitive deck. And that's probably a reason why Beelzemon got so high, on top of just the fact that he was just a very hard to deal with deck. He could move super fast, had some super explosive gameplay, both in terms of like short game and long game. So he was just a really good deck. Then coming in second was Hunters at about 15%. Then Black War Greymon at about 9%. Red Hybrids at about 8%. And then Machinedramon is like the last big noticeable one, coming in as the fifth best deck at about 5% of the meta share. So that is basically your top 5 out of like the top 13. Ulforce, Cross Hearts, Security Control, War Greymon, Blue Flare, Yellow Hybrid, Bloomlord, and Cross Merva were basically the other decks. So that literally was BT12 in a nutshell. So, yeah.
And it's a little disheartening to see, but I mean, at least this format wasn't very long, and we will be moving into the next one. EX4, I mean, do we even have any regionals in EX4? I don't think so.
Yeah, we have EX4 regionals.
Do we? Okay, because
Yes.
I thought, because then, yeah, BT13 comes out July 21st. I gotta see. I'd have to look at the.
Because the next set of regionals comes out in July, and at the end of June is when we get EX4.
Oh, oh yeah.
So we will have a couple of regionals in EX4, which is just going to be BT 12 2.0.
Let's see.
So just going over the top 16, because we already mentioned last week what topped these events. The top deck from Top Cut was Red Hybrids, and then second place was Bloom, then All Force, and then a lot of Beelzemon X's back to back. Like, we're not seeing any new decks enter top 16s, which is pretty good. And pretty bad at the same time, because now the meta is becoming stagnant around these decks, and it's showing the power that these decks have compared to literally the rest of the entire game. So that's like the pros and the cons. And then just going over the oh, we do have TAC Online regionals. Okay. And then as far as the TAC Online regionals, Security Control won it, and then there was still just a massive influx of Beelzemons, and again, nothing really new is entering this meta.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're kind of solved now. It won't. Oh, Jesmon, that's pretty cool. And Mastamon, pretty cool. But
yeah, some people are still playing a whole bunch of different decks. It's just whether they're winning or not is to be determined, and it's very clear as day that they're not winning. Even though, like, yes, proportionally, if more people played them, they'd have a higher chance to win, but there goes that compounding factor where it's just like people aren't playing them because they're not winning versus the decks that are more known to win. So perception is a lot of what makes up a meta.
Oh, okay. I mean, that makes sense. Okay. I still think it's cool, but yeah, you're definitely right. It's very easy. I mean, to play the decks, to be successful with them is a completely different story.
Yeah. And then in Momocon, Hunters won, and then again, same difference, just flood of Beelzemon X's. We don't have like the meta breakdown, but yeah, it's just Beelzemon City.
Am I crazy?
So that's like, we've had good formats and we've had bad formats before. So hopefully BT13 is definitely going to be shaking stuff up. Looking at the ban and restrictions, I do think that the hit to Beelzemon is definitely going to be slowing the deck down, making it less explosive. So maybe there's going to be more diversity coming into the format as a result. But transitioning into Ultimate Cup, just because Ultimate Cup's BT12 format is the next big thing. We do have a little bit of early data, and then obviously one region's data isn't necessarily enough to say this is the meta, but it does allow us to kind of get a good sneak peek on what we could expect, because again, perception is everything. So if you want to go over the Latin American top 16, Teddy.
Of course. So looking at this, who topped it, who won, was a Bloomlord. That's pretty fair, even with the hit. Bloomlord not getting knocked down. It's still very strong. So of course this would stay. All Force, once again, another. Of course, this deck is just really good in this kind of format. Machine German, another one that we noticed. Surprised Red Hybrid didn't do a little bit better, but I think because of all the Machine Germans, maybe the Red Hybrid was just these for having a hard time. I mean, this making it up to top 5 is still pretty good. Beelzemon also, the deck does not change basically at all for this format. So I think it's just because the advent of more Machine Germans, maybe we just didn't see as in this particular tournament that many Beelzemons, but I'm sure that'll probably change when it comes to us. But this is fairly generic. This is what, 5 different decks? Yes. One, two, three,
Yeah,
four,
it's five
five different
different
decks.
decks.
That's fairly generic, and we kind of knew that this was going to be the case. I mean, the decks that got hit, yeah, I mean, Bloomlord got hit technically twice, and it still won. So that tells you it didn't really get hurt that bad. And the replacements for the cards are, they're not the best, of course, but they do the job. All Force is essentially untouched, so it makes sense that this would do good. Shindramon's essentially untouched. You just switch to black instead of take the pure red stuff out, switch to the black stuff. So it doesn't change too much to how the deck functions.
No, it's mostly
some
still
interesting
the same.
ones though. We were looking at the deck list. Some interesting decks are choices for the decks. So go into that a little bit later. Red Hybrid, I mean that deck basically doesn't change. You just lose the Bokos and Nemons, and then
Omnimon.
you just put that too if you use those. You just basically all the white stuff, you replace them with either memory boosts, gravity crush, just more consistency. I don't think it really hurts the deck at all. Just makes it a little bit harder to close out a game, but it's not that much harder.
Yeah, it's not like we didn't expect these 5 decks to do as well as they do, because if we literally look at the BT12 competitive results, if you look at the decks that have single color in it, you literally have Beelzemon, Black War Greymon, although that's more of a mix, so you'd be forced to play either red or black, which does affect the deck a little bit, but the deck can still be playable. Then you have red hybrids, All Force, you have War Greymon, which again is in that same camp as Black War Greymon. You got to pick your color and go with it. Blue Flare, Yellow Hybrid, and Bloomlord. Like, those are all your single color decks. So out of those, literally just seeing the 5 that we have seen top, like, it almost makes it for a very easy read, because we just took literally the best monocolor decks, and then boom, there's your meta. Like, nothing is actually changing, which is the sad and expected part when it comes to this type of rule set from Ultimate Cup, which is kind of why I'm not like super thrilled with it, because like, at least with the multiple different colors, I get more of a diverse spread, and I'm not just playing a slightly watered down version of the deck, or like literally an untouched version of the deck, and like just playing against not the multicolored decks.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely more flexibility in playing normal format. Of course, just being able to mix whatever colors gives you more freedom to make some more interesting deck choices and things like that. But I do like that they have this format for the decks that can't compete in this meta, because even if you're looking at like the meta, like the meta spreadsheet there, I mean, those decks are very far and few between and compared to the ones just up the top of the list. So Machine Dramon getting a chance to shine like in the forefront, to me, is pretty cool. I mean, Bloomlord, same with Old Force, those decks getting a chance to shine just straight out the gate, like that to me is fun. But I do understand it is definitely a limiting format, and there's not very much room for creativity.
Although,
Or on the vice verse, there is, but it's like suboptimal. So it's like you kind of have to pick and choose where it is, because there are some definitely interesting deck choices or card choices in some of these lists, especially like in the Machine Dramons and the that Old Force, some of those Old Force lists. There's a lot of interesting choices. So there is some. It's just, is it really better?
I mean, so going over some of the interesting choices, with Beelzemon, obviously the limitation to the EX2 Impmon is going to affect the deck, but it seems like just based on the early stuff that we saw come out of Latin America, we already kind of have a good replacement lineup for rookies. They were running 12 rookies, which 12 rookies isn't uncommon. They're still just running 4 of the starter deck, 4 of Imp X, and then now they're running 2 BT2 Imps, 1 BT6 Imp, and 1 EX2 Imp. So that seems to be the new lineup that Latin America has adopted, and I don't necessarily disagree with any of those choices at all. I like running 13 rookies, so I probably would have just put in another BT2 imp. Um, but yeah, it just, all of these choices just seem to make sense to me mentally. And that's probably going to leak over into how Beelzebub is going to have to adapt in a like more hardcore competitive environment with his limitation active there as well.
Yeah, I mean the deck is almost. I mean, it's definitely hurt a bit by the list, but it's not that bad. It's fine. The deck will still function the same exact way. It'll just be maybe a turn or two slower, which does matter, but I don't think it'll hurt it to the point where it won't be used.
Yeah, and then Machine German, that's a deck that has a little bit more flexibility in terms of like what people are running, but a lot of the Latin Americans kind of just agreed on a couple of decent tech choices. So for the level 4s, they decided to tech in like two Ganemon. Ganemon is the level 4 black save based Digimon out of like the Zenimon line, and he just has reboot as an inheritable to give to literally whatever. And what they actually were doing and using Ganemon for is not only does he hard play for 4 in case you really just need to hard play him, but he pairs very nicely with Black Mach Galgamon. So that way you could get the DP boost off of that and have extra ways to be able to have reboot as well. Because take away the red stuff and you don't have a whole lot of options for black DP boosts. I think it's literally between that and Cyberdramon. And Cyberdramon, if your tamers aren't suspending, literally does nothing. So
yeah, it's definitely the more suboptimal choice to go cyber.
Yeah.
Instead of I do agree with this choice. This is where like some of the creativity comes in, because that's definitely something I wasn't even looking at like at all. Like I would not have even thought about that card, and it just makes sense in the deck. It makes sense. The cheap body gives you another way to see reboot, which if you don't see the level 5 reboot, then at least you have this one that does it. Allows you to build a stronger stack in the back. That just makes sense. It's just a good choice.
Yeah, and then one of their other tech choices was Mercurymon. Just because he has a on play and win Digivolve ability to be able to give anything blocker. So just more defensive capabilities. The fact that you still are running Tamers means that you have that hybrid factor. Cheap on evolution in case you're hiding him and raising, so it's not like there's that much of a downside there. So just another solid generic level 4. And then the other tech card that they were starting to adopt is starter deck Ludamon. Or Ludomon. So Ludamon on play, just shove it underneath your part red Digimon or red Digimon, and then you can basically draw a card. You're not playing another Legends Arms. Although you could play another Ludamon, but most of the time you're just going to end up drawing a card just from tucking, and then he gives part or part red Digimon the blocker ability, so more extra ways to have blocker, more defensive. And this also pairs up very nicely with the Doru stuff, because it's an extra way to be able to add to your inheritables to trigger their abilities. So I think that's like another card that just makes sense.
Yeah, it's just solid, and it could be used in multiple applications. Like you build your stack out, promote, and then you could slam him, give your guy blocker, search a card off the top. I mean, it's consistency while simultaneously giving you the defense that the deck already does, and maximizing that is pretty good. So I like it. I like all of those tech choices. I think they all make sense, and they don't do anything to hamper the deck. They only enhance it.
Yeah.
Which is in this format. This is where like this format will allow for things like that, where people have to go out of their way to look and really evaluate cards and see how they interact with decks. And this is just one of those interactions where these Latin American players found some very interesting ways to enhance the deck. since it is losing some very key power from the red stuff.
Yeah, and the easiest thing that I generally like to do when I'm like demaking decks, I guess, is just how I'll phrase it for this. But usually I'll just hop into a database and look to see what the deck is lacking or what the deck doesn't have, or like in terms of what I'm removing from it. And then I'll just try to find cards as close and comparable to those abilities as I humanly possibly can get. And this, like, I've had and covered this in videos multiple times in terms of like smart substitutions, and like these are just smart substitutions. So I definitely like those. Then All Force really isn't doing anything super spicy. You have the brand new Maelstrom option. That's basically just a better version of Cocytus Breath, because you just add to your inheritables and then it costs less than Cocytus Breath, while getting rid of the Digimon. It needs it mostly for Court Spawn. I don't think it does anything in most other matchups. It can still be a good security bomb, but against like Machine Dramon, it really doesn't do anything because he should have protection against that.
Not the regular Machine Dramon. Both the regular Machine Dramons don't, but Chaos Dramon does.
Yeah.
So
and then
it could matter in that matchup.
Yeah, and then the only other spicy tech card from the All Forces was the EX3 Dracomon, just for some DP boosting. The searching is pretty nice, but the DP boosting seems like that's the main goal, just to be able to hit over specific numbers, probably again for like Quartz and Chaos. Although less so for Quartz, because I think you have to unsuspend.
Yeah, you can't do it for Quartz. But the Machine Dramon definitely matters, because then all they need is at least one of the tie tamers, and then they swing over Machine Dramon. All of the Chaos and Machine and all that.
Yeah, so it de-incentivizes them from wanting to block, which makes the matchup a little bit easier for you if you're in that state where you're aggressing. So another tech choice that I definitely like.
Yeah, I agree with it. There's nothing wrong with it. It synergizes with the deck, like directly synergizes with it, so it's not even like this is pretty suboptimal. No, it specifically is for Drummond, so, and half the deck is Drummond. So it makes sense. It really does.
Yeah. I think Bloomlord, they literally were just running Pistmon. So like they were running the Lotusmon from BT10 as a potential replacement mega, but a lot of them actually just said, no, we're good. 5 megas is plenty. Bloomlord is obviously one of the better ones. So like as long as you just see your Bloomlord, like you're still golden. And then Pistmon having an inheritable that you could actually use while being in Digisorption just seemed like it was the most logical replacement. Those were the only like really spicy tech that Bloomlord was incorporating from Latin America, which again is all just, yes, this makes sense. This just seems obvious. Although I say that, and sometimes the obvious things aren't actually obvious.
Thing is, Pistmon like low key works in like a lot of ways, because the inheritable is actually like crazy for the deck. Like 1,000 for each of your other suspended Digimon. Like that's actually really, really strong, making it really hard to get over your. For example, if you do get into Quartzmon, now DP is going to be a lot harder if you have multiple bodies on the board. He'll be, I mean, just with 2, he's 17,000. Or is it 17? It's 1,000 for each. So yes, 1,000 for each of them. So, including himself, so it would be 18 actually. Like I like Pistmon a lot. I think it makes sense, and it actually like not even low key. It just actually is good.
Yeah, and there was I believe there was a TAC Ultimate Cup from Oceania, but we don't have that data yet to go over. So hopefully that data will come maybe next week, and we get a little bit of a better picture in terms of like where Ultimate Cup sits. But as far as like predictions on what other decks you think would have success in Ultimate Cup outside of like the obvious, here's the single colored meta competitive decks, What do you think is able to top in this type of a format?
I mean, it wasn't shown on this, but I think Galamon is pretty solid into through two of these matchups. Like Bloomlord, Galamon eats that deck alive. And then same with, especially now with the hits, now the deck is even easier to deal with. Machine Dramon is a little hard. It can do it, but it requires a little bit more. Ulforce is not so bad if they don't have that many arenas. The matchup is fine. Beelzemon, you can, but you need to get a little lucky and hope that they don't hit it. The Mills is hard. I think Galamon has a solid shot of doing well in this format. But I think it also depends on the Machine Dramon, because Machine Dramon is a very hard deck for Galamon to get through. Every other deck here, Galamon can do and has a decent shot, but Machine Dramon, that's a hard matchup for the deck.
Yeah, Machine Dramon just has a lot of pretty good matchups when you get into your Chaos X. And especially if you have all of the protections, there's not really a whole lot of things that actually can deal with it, which is probably why we've seen Machine Dramon in such high numbers for the Latin American event, is because of that type of mentality where I just need to get into this once, probably have enough tamers on the field to multi-block, and then I'm just golden. Like, I could just do whatever I want.
Yeah, with Hunters gone, they don't have to care. They can just slam a million tamers.
Because I'm looking at some of like these other past Ultimate Cups from BT11, and even though, yes, the meta is completely different, there's still just a lot of like comparable things that we could take from it. So Dark Nightmon, I don't necessarily think is that great to take into it. Same thing with Merva Loop. Again, I don't necessarily see it doing insanely well. Blue Flares could. Blue Flare still has the potential to come in and do some stuff, but again, the more Machine Dramons get played, the harder it is for Blue Flares, because Blue Flares did well in BT11 because it was farming the Bloom Lords, and now that there's going to be less Bloom Lords, it has less of the farm potential. So I think, like, obviously we've already talked about yellow hybrids being one of the better monocolor decks, especially yellow. I think that's going to be a pretty good one. But I actually think maybe a change to Grandis might actually still be able to do well as like a good surprise deck.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that they hold the promo in the hand for when they want to go crazy with the OTK, and then they just focus solely on control. I like that. I mean, I could see.
I mean, there's less things for it to be able to control as well, but I still think like it just having access to Quartzmon definitely makes it viable. Like, it has a good control style gameplay. It can hit the numbers it needs to in terms of like a good DP threshold. I think like your average mega, you usually want to try to hit for at least 16k. So that way you're safely able to beat over any level 6 and most level 7s. So that's kind of like the DP threshold you need to hit, and Grandis can get there. And then you just have good tempo and efficiency tools as well. And you're not like hardcore quartzing, like in terms of like
option, but
yeah,
it's not the main.
In terms of leaning into its strategy and using it, quartz is just, hey, I have space for a level 7. Quartzmon's a green level 7, makes sense. Quartzmon's stupidly good, sure.
I like it. I think it makes sense, and if your opponent plays into it, especially if them not knowing or not expecting the Quartzmon to come out, and they'll go wide so that they can try and deal with the Grandis. I like it. It makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, we could always still see like a Dorbic OTK as just another surprise deck.
I mean, can you though? You don't have the blue.
You don't have the blue, but you could still build like a really solid red stack.
Yeah, just hit really hard and pray they can't deal with it.
Yeah, so like just because you still have tools that give you lots of security attack plus. You just don't have the unsuspend, but you do just have some good, decent cards and just a cheap, high-level body that can hit really hard sometimes could just put enough pressure onto the opponent where it's just like, okay, I might not be able to handle this.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. I mean, I'd have to see some lists. I think it could. It could work because I mean, you could do things like having the Savior Huck from BT6.
Yeah, just
But then you have
Savior
to have
Huck
the
and Sister Mon.
sisters.
That's
Yeah, you
uh
can't do that then. So
I
then
oh
it's
yeah,
hard.
you don't have Sister Mons because it's white.
Never mind.
I think you just don't care and you're just going for like the big hit, and even though you don't have the way to like unsuspend and actually OTK, if they just don't have the ability to respond fast enough to that level 6, you can still just easily
That's true.
swing things in your favor. And then you
Yeah, if
still
you
have
get
some
early.
red level 7s that also could just act as like really good game finishers. So you have the Agumon Bond of Courage that like literally can swing, delete a Digimon, and then take the last security for free, and then now you're swinging for game while killing the body that was potentially stopping you. Then you also have Gallantmon Crimson Mode that does something very similar.
Yeah, it nukes a body, the highest DP, and then trashes one security guaranteed, but then another security for every 10. So I could see that. I could see that. I could see that working. And then you have like gravity crushes, so you can facilitate the cost. I, I like it. Okay, I might have to look at some lists and see what they're doing because that sounds pretty cool.
I mean, I'll never like OTK decks are usually like the most rogue things ever. Just
Yeah, of course.
because the ability to hit really hard is always going to be meta, and how fast and consistent you could do it is like the real question. Granted, the deck does kind of just fall apart against a fully set up Machine Dramon, but
You auto lose.
yeah, but that's a lot of decks in Ultimate Cup, which is why like Machine Dramon is positioned very well for this coming Ultimate Cup.
Oh yeah, you better get hope if you're playing. Hope you're good at the mirror because that is not a mirror I want to play.
No, and I think like maybe that's kind of why like this is a crazy pick. But Alphamon, like even though he's not OTK Alphamon, D Digivolve is still very relevant.
Yeah, I guess that one D Digivolve is sometimes is enough to just be like, nope, I don't want to deal with you. D Digivolve one.
Yeah, like that's why the Greymon decks, more specifically Blackboard Greymon, the not promo, the BT8
BT8.
metal, just D Digivolve is so obnoxious. Like I wrote off D Digivolve early on because like early on it was actually kind of a bad source of removal, and now it's like actually low key one of the best removals just because like there's very little that actually can stop it.
Yeah, there's no counters to it currently besides a few niche cards. So that
Yeah.
makes sense. I like the alpha. I'd be interested to see what the deck looks like because it's pretty rough right now.
I mean, it literally doesn't change. You just can't play Cool Boy. So you have to make up Cool Boy for probably more UGs and some other stuff. Like, Alphamon doesn't really lose a whole lot. So, at least comparatively to what it was doing before Ultimate Cup.
I mean, of course. Yeah, it doesn't do. I mean, you just don't have the same memory manipulation. But I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I feel like that wouldn't be too bad. It's just your top end isn't very, or your mid, I should say, your level fives. You just don't have any good level fives besides the Doru Gray, and that's limited.
Yeah.
So it's like,
I've been digging on social media. I think Machine
your level
Dramon.
sixes are so strong.
Yeah, I've been digging on social media, and I do think Machine Dramon won Tax Ultimate Cup. So once that list comes out, I think that's definitely gonna put into people's brains how good Machine Dramon is for Ultimate Cup, because there's like literally nothing that can deal with it. And that's usually part of the problem on like how a deck arises to its highest, like to the high status, is can other decks actually do anything about what you're doing? If the answer is no, then you're just going to have
You
a good
won.
time, and you're just going to sit there and you're just going to basically eat up a free win almost. But if the deck is slow, then that allows faster decks to be able to beat it, but anything that's not exactly fast enough to be able to outbeat it, especially in Machine Dramon's case, it just makes sense why Machine Dramon is looking to be the boogeyman.
Yeah, for this format, I'm interested to see if how people adapt to it, because I don't know how you do with the decks available.
And that's
Because
part
like,
of that's part of my problem with Ultimate Cups and kind of just why I'm not a huge fan of them. I had a guy at locals. I was playing against him today. He's just like, yes, I have two decks. I'm not playing an Ultimate Cup because I can't play either of my two decks. One was Hunters and the other was Crosshearts. And I'm just like, I am so sorry for you. And he's like, it's okay. Bandai's just going to have to change it next time so I can actually try to play in those events. Um,
I guess that makes sense. I guess
but
that's fair.
outside of that, the just lackingness in terms of like some of the tech and tools to be able to have a good alternative format is partially the reason why I personally don't like them again, because if I wanted to play Digimon, I'll just play Digimon. I don't want to abide by this special restriction that isn't necessarily changing the game to make it better, in my perspective, especially in this type of a format where BT12 is already super limited in what you're able to run and able to have success with. And now you're just compounding that to remove the decks that actually have answers to specific other decks that are keeping some of them in check, and it's just like, what are we doing here?
I can see that, and then I agree to an extent. I just think it's not a bad idea to have different formats, because like Machine Dramon is damn near unplayable in this format. Like it's good, and you can definitely win. Deck. Yeah, but look at the numbers. Like that's like barely like just because it does better than the other decks doesn't mean it's better than like doing like you can't play it against like Hunters. You just auto lose. You play against Crossheart.
Yeah, that is
like
pretty bad.
So it's like there's decks that like hard gatekeep it. So this one format where it actually can shine and actually show off what it can do, I don't mind it, and they'll eventually make something that just dramatically beats it in this kind of format if they ever go back to this format. Because this, mind you, this could change next year. This could just be gone, and we'll never see this type of format ever.
Knowing Bandai's,
probably not.
Knowing Bandai's history on like how they've been doing things with Digimon, next year definitely is probably going to be a different format. Like Ultimate Cup has always been like this experimental zone where it's just like, yeah, we're gonna subtly tweak some of the changes and see how the community acts and responds and if these were good or not. So I think that next year they're going to implement a different rule set based on some of the results that they've gotten in like surveys and whatnot, based on like how people have been enjoying it, and then like last year we had Ultimate Cups have mulligans, and now mulligans are officially part of the game. We see that certain ban and restrictions kind of reflect what Ultimate Cups have been kind of showing us that they're looking at. So they use them to like gather data and do some testing of weird and wacky stuff, and I don't mind it. But sometimes they're hits, sometimes they're not.
Yeah, this time maybe it's just not your cup of tea, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with it being that way. Some people absolutely love it. They get to actually play their Bloom Lord and not fear Beelzemon nuking everything, or Hunters just tucking their stuff into the other bodies and then nuking the little bodies. Like I think it's fine, and it gives these other decks they're still good. Of course, they're still good in the normal meta, but it gives them a chance to really be in the forefront and see how people react to them being in the forefront, like actually doing it. The only one that really stayed is Beelzemon, but I think because of Machine Dramon being so highly played, it might just get bumped down in this particular format.
I think it still has, like, it goes to a speed issue where it's just like, if you're not fast enough to be able to deal with a stacked Machine Dramon, I think most decks just auto lose. And I think even with the limitation, Beelzemon is one of those decks where it is fast and consistent enough to still be able to do what it needs to do. It is just a shame that, like, I'm happy to see red hybrids in Latin America able to top, but, like, Machine Dramon, if they get, like, I'll spoil this right now. If you see, if you see two analog, as a red hybrids player, if you see two analog mans out on the field and they have a Chaos X, the game is basically over. Like,
you have lost.
Yeah, there's very little that you can do. But if you can aggress them hard enough before they get to that point, you're still fine. Like, it's interesting that even though the meta is hyper condensed compared to others, we still do have a wide variety of different gameplay strategies and play patterns. So, like, yes, it is unfortunate to see the unteenth Beelzemon or the unteenth Machine Dramon, but those two decks are doing completely different things. And then you have on the other end of the spectrum, like, your red hybrids as, like, the hyper aggressive deck.
It's like, if you look at every single one of these decks, they all do dramatically different things. Bloom Lord floods the field, hits hard. All Force, it just sets up one big stack and then it just swings multiple times, sets up a wall that's hard to get over. Machine Dramon kind of does the same thing, but it said it's more like a control because your DD
it's less tamer focused.
Yeah. And then red hybrid, pure aggro, just hit really hard. Same with Beelzemon, mill, do all that stuff. I think they all play so dramatically different that I think it's interesting to see.
Yeah, like, it's definitely not as bad of, like, a format or meta as BT7 with blue hybrids, because literally there was only two playable decks. It was blue hybrids or yellow hybrids, and yellow hybrids still lost to blue hybrids. And then everything else was literally just actually scrapping by for whatever pennies it could pick up. It was that bad, and this isn't that bad. Most of it, kind of like what we said, is just perspective, where it's just like, oh, Beelzemon is already a really good deck, so I want to pick up Beelzemon. Oh, Beelzemon's just so happens to be a super accessible deck. Cool, that just makes it easier to pick it up. So, like, there's a lot of different factors that go into how a meta is developed, and even though sometimes, yes, it is a little bit on the obvious side to read like where the meta is going in terms of, like, alternate sub-formats, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's devoid of everything. Like, I think, like, if I was playing an Ultimate Cup, which I'm not, but if I was, I would actually be looking either at red hybrids or yellow hybrids. Just because yellow hybrids, if they don't have the Machine Dramon from EX1, they're susceptible to DP reduction. So that gives me a out to be able to have a DP reduction control-based yellow hybrids and still be able to do well while also still having a decent amount of, like, aggressive push plays, because my tamers just gave me so much value.
Yeah, and they're all 4 costs, so they can't get popped by the tamer deletion. So
yeah, because they run less Zoes now, because Zoe isn't as relevant. The searching through your security is fine, but if you're not hardcore recovering as much, there's no reason to, like, look past there more than once.
Yeah, you're only running maybe 2 of it at most, and that's just for after you've recovered a few times, just to see if you find a Jet Sylphie or not. It's really just for Jet Sylphie. And if you hit the others, it's fine, but you don't really care.
Yeah, thinking about it now, I actually think, like, out of the 5 decks, aren't each of these a different color that's being represented?
Yeah, blue, green, black, red, and purple. Yeah. Well,
yeah, the only one you're missing is yellow, which I think yellow hybrids is probably the best monocolor yellow deck.
Yeah, I don't think we have anything better. Unless you run, like, a weird Venusmon Turbo, but even then, that's not very good.
Venusmon Shaman Turbo, let's go.
You could. I mean, you probably could make it work, but I think you're probably just better off using that in yellow hybrid, and then.
I mean, you're not wrong. Venus Mon is just such an insanely powerful card because it also turns off a lot of like Machine Dramon plays because they also try to play like Black War Greymon where it's like, let me just attack into your Digimon and just control your field. And the fact that you could just be like, no fam, you're not going to be able to do anything about this Venus Mon for a whole turn is just really good. I don't think they usually play a whole lot of ways to be able to recursively add security attack minus because
No.
yeah, because
That's
fun fact, security attack plus and security attack minus do not cancel each other out. Like in terms of how many security attacks, like the damage that you're doing, yes, they do, but they are still completely separate effects that are stacked onto the card. So they do not actually fundamentally cancel them out.
Yeah. I like that. I mean, I see people. You could probably start leaning into that, like using Gokumon as like a level 5, just a 3 cost level 5 to play, and then I like that. I think you could make it work, and then now you have something that can every time when it attacks, you can recursively keep giving something security -1, making it impossible for them to really deal with your Venusmon.
Yeah, plus with yellow, you also get Lonke, which is another way to be able to remove the Machine Dramon, even if it does have DP reduction protection, is if your security is just low enough, Lonke just gets rid of it for you. So, like,
Yep, real
that's,
less is the sweet spot.
yeah, that's why I'm, like, looking at yellow hybrids as, like, a good, yellow deck if you're going to take yellow into the event. Because I think, like, right now with the consolidation, there's not really much of a reason to run anything but these top 5 lists. And we've already stated there's a couple of other like decently rogue ones that you could pick on top of that. But like the 5 that Latin America has showed us kind of just seems like the 5 that are just no-brainers to run when it comes to like playing in Ultimate Cup, which is unfortunate, but the fun part is seeing how we could take this information and adapt and go forward with it to be able to take the opponent by surprise and do as well as you possibly can.
Yeah, see, that's where I feel like we have that time to really look at this and be like, okay, we've seen this. This is a small snippet, by the way, a small snippet of the entire thing. So we don't know truly if this is exactly what it'll be like. This is just a good little glimpse to see, but this gives us a good idea. There's probably going to be a good amount of Machine Dramons. So if your deck can't deal with Machine Dramon effectively, you probably don't want to play it. Or if you do, if it can't deal with it, you got to start finding ways to deal with it. And that's where we'll see more of the creativity in terms of the deck lists and things like that.
Yeah. Now, this is going to sound like a really silly question, Teddy, but because I'm not playing in any of the Ultimate Cups for the entire year, when are Ultimate Cups actually? I know, like, I can't even sign up for them, even if I decided I randomly wanted to play, just because we have to sign up for these tournaments, like, 2 months in advance, or a month in advance, but I do not legitimately remember when Ultimate Cups start. I know, like, some of them, for some regions, have already started.
Yeah, June, late June, and then all throughout July. Like we just, of course, we saw. We had that one. Then we have June 10th is the next one coming up.
So that's next week.
Next weekend. Yeah, this weekend, Saturday coming up. Then the 17th, which is, of course, the following weekend on Saturday. And then there's a Core TCG on the 24th of June. And then Latin America, we just had theirs today.
Yeah, how many for the other regions are firing? Because I always like to kind of keep track, like, are they running more Ultimate Cups or are they running more regionals? Because with invites, again, being a very sore topic for North American players, like, are we actually being, like, having more Ultimate Cups than regionals?
Well, Latin America only has 2. They have another one happening on the 17th, so next week on Saturday. Oceania only has 2, both yesterday, which we have the information for, and then the 25th. which is a Sunday, I believe it is. Europe has an offline Ultimate Cup, which is pretty. It already did actually. What the heck? Yesterday or today, I should say. It had one. Then there's online ones. There's one on the 11th. Then one July 1st. So 3 for Europe, and then 2 for the other regions, and then we have only 3 as well.
That definitely sounds like they're running more Ultimate Cups than they are regionals.
100%.
Which to me is actually really sad because with North America not getting invites in terms of like the way we used to, and it's only to regional top 16 for North America only. All the other regions, it literally doesn't matter because nationals is just another event.
Yeah, exactly.
It really just puts even more of a sour point in my mouth in terms of like my discontent with the state of competitive play. And I do like the Ultimate Cup prizing.
Yeah, infinitely better.
Yes, it definitely, like, if you just care about straight up prizing alone and you don't care about the invite, Ultimate Cup is the format to play in. Just because it has the better looking prizing and it has like it just seems like it's going to be a really fun and interesting time if you're into that type of stuff. Unfortunately, because I am in a very I'm using this word very loosely because I probably spend more money on Digimon than I should. Luxurious position where I have almost every single card except for a couple of promos. Like alt arts just don't hit me the same. And I'm not a max rarity person because I already spend too much money on the game. So I'm just like, get me the cards, get me the ability to play, and I don't care about the rest. So, yeah, max rarity doesn't really do it for me. So that's why like sometimes the prizing isn't like so much of a factor. And why like invites kind of draw me more towards the competitive side of things because it makes me feel like I'm actually winning something.
No, I understand that completely. I mean, there's nothing wrong with feeling that way because that's where you get your enjoyment of the game in the competitive aspect. I think that's perfectly fine. There's not really much to say in regards to that. Where I differ is I don't mind these things happening because it just gives people an avenue to play something a little bit more fun where they don't necessarily care for said thing. Like, of course, I definitely want to earn invites and things like that. I want to do as best as I can when I play in these competitive events, but I also don't mind just taking this tournament to just say, screw it, let me just play something stupid fun that I would never get to actually do well with in the normal format. Like, I can't wait to play either, funnily enough, you say Yellow Hybrid, but those are the 2 decks that I want to play the most is Old Force and Yellow Hybrid. Those would be the 2 decks that I would play in Ultimate Cup format. And I can never play those in this format right now. They don't work. They are not as good. Old Force I can get away with a little bit more, but Yellow Hybrid it's fine, but you get steamrolled by everything in this format right now.
Yeah,
So it's like
there's a couple of rough matchups. I did
all the Crossfire decks destroy you. All the Beelzemon eats you alive. It's hard. It's a hard time to play Yellow Hybrid right now.
It's just a hard time to play a lot of other decks.
Fair enough. That yeah. I
Like
agree
with
there.
with like because that's where the interesting part of like just the format that we're in is even though there's like a diversity in the top 5 decks in terms of like colors and playstyles being represented, it's just the fact that those 5 decks are like literally the only ones that are playable like actually this time is the more interesting thing because we haven't really experienced a whole lot of that before in Digimon because like you could get away with so much before this format and now with this consolidation it definitely seems like there's less room for error and less that you could get away with because I was talking with some dudes at locals and I was just like one of them was brand new to the game. He has a Jesmon deck because he got the Jesmon starter deck. Again, he can't play an Ultimate Cup because his deck is not legal. But that's just an unfortunate byproduct. And he was coming from Dragon Ball, and he's just like, man, Digimon is just such more of an accessible, fun game than Dragon Ball. And he was really, really happy. Even though he can't play in Ultimate Cup, he's just like, I can at least appreciate that they're trying to change and do different things to try to make the game as enjoyable as they possibly can.
It's like slightly less stale, and I understand it. I appreciate that they have these things because they could just not. They really could. They could just be like, nah, we don't need any other format type of games. We just main format. That's all you get to play forever. And then that the game would just hurt for that. And I personally would not mind it just because I don't care. I just want to play the game. But I am happy they have these things because this gives room for other things down the line. Yes, maybe this format isn't really that much fun, but maybe down the line, you never know, something more interesting comes out that appeals to you. And then that now you have another avenue to play the same card game, but in a different way. That's maybe more refreshing and different than whatever format you're playing in. If you don't really enjoy the format you're playing in, this gives you an alternative, which I like. I think that's important for card games to do because then it makes it harder for the game to get stale. And I personally like it. And of course, I mean, totally biased. I want all these Gallantmon cards, so of course I love this, but that's just me being a biased little Gallantmon nerd.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. So, with the idea of trying to keep things as fresh and fun in mind, what would be a alternate format you would want them to try next year for Ultimate Cup?
I don't know. I mean, there are some interesting formats that I like. I played, what is that format called where you only have one of a card?
Singleton?
I loved that format. I had so much fun with that. But
right, you like singletons. Got it.
I had so much fun with a format like that because we had not too long ago we tried that at a local just for shits and giggles, and it was hilarious you really had to think about stuff before you put a card down. You were like, oh god, do I really want to use this effect now? Can he deal with this? And then now I just lose probably this one. It was interesting. Now I don't know how well that would register to an online tournament setting. And God, for submitting deck lists, that would be probably a logistical nightmare. But I think it would be fun. I mean, there's plenty of fun things you can do. I would have to look at some other formats because I would have to pull up that one list that has all the other formats that they have. But there were some cool ones on that list that they had. Then I'm surprised they went with the single color one because that was just, I think, the most generic one. But they had some interesting formats on that thing. I need to see if I can find that list. 2v2 would be hilariously fun too. I like that one, Maple Leaf Bro.
Yeah,
formats like that would be cool.
My surprise format that I would want them to test. I'm not a huge rotation fan, and I don't like the idea of rotation. I don't think it solves nearly as many problems as people actually thinks it solves. Everyone's just like, oh, if they implemented rotation, then we don't have to deal with this. And it's just like, okay, yeah, you could implement it in a legacy format, but rotation doesn't solve all of the problems. But I would like to see them do an actual evolving Ultimate Cup, where they do a block format. So they obviously would have to probably have a really big write-up on terms of what is considered part of what block, because there have been some reprints with the change of the block icon and some without. So they would have to do a really in-depth write-up, which is why I don't think this is very likely. But a block format Ultimate Cup, I think, would be insanely refreshing, because when a new set comes out, now the Ultimate Cup changes even more dramatically than it would for what we currently have with the single color format. Because it's just okay, here's the set, let's just take the colored meta decks, throw them out the window. What do we have left? There's our meta. With the block, you introduce new sets, and that actually opens up the doors to even more possibilities where some cards in one block that wouldn't be used now are. So I think, like, to keep things really interesting, that would be a way for them to kind of pseudo test their rotation idea, if they were to, and then have just something completely different in terms of how we approach Digimon.
I like that. I could see that being fun and different as long as they, do it right and they
Yeah,
really,
that's the key. They have to do it right.
as long as they, actually go through and block them off, yeah, you're right. They probably won't do it because they have to make a detailed, uh, like, oh my
A
god, a
block
document,
list. Yeah, a
a
document
detailed
of the
document
block
showing
list.
what this is.
And that's a nightmare because of like all of the reprints and stuff. And as we've already learned, Bandai does not like doing a whole lot of extra work. Uh,
No, they like to be as hands off as they possibly can be.
yeah, and it clearly shows. In a lot of the stuff that they do is just, I don't want to say like hardcore lazy, but it just, they could do more.
The ceiling wasn't too high with a lot
No,
of the stuff they do.
no.
And that's not even like being outrageous. That's just you can tell. It's the not necessarily the bare minimum, but just slightly above the bare minimum.
And sometimes like that's not necessarily the worst thing because they are a business and doing minimalistic things and still maximizing profits is like a hardcore business decision. So like it from a business perspective, it's not necessarily their fault. It's just we, the audience, can feel that there isn't as much love and attention put into it as we would like or expect.
Yeah, I agree there. They definitely do lack a little on that regard. But it I think it's fine, and I mean they are a business, like you say, at the end of the day. So it's unfortunate. We would want to be in a perfect world. Would be they still make money, but we the players still get stuff that we want. That's ideal world. Is it happening? Probably not all the time, but if we can make it, if they can get it to a point where more often than not they're making the consumers happy and still making money, we're probably in a good spot. We're probably fine. Um, Now, whether that is the case or not, that is completely up to you as the player to decide whether or not something is you like it or not. If you asked me right now, currently, I am enjoying my time playing the game. I like everything that is happening right now. The only thing that I could maybe not like is how they're treating the competitive players. Other than that, I mean, I'm okay. As a consumer of the game, I'm okay. I'm having fun, so I'm good. But maybe you ask some other players, they're probably not having as much fun. So it really just depends on your stance and what you're trying to get out of the game.
Yeah, I definitely am not enjoying this format as much as other people. It's not that I don't have a deck to play. I do. Red Hybrids is kind of my baby for the time being, just because I like aggressive decks, and I'm excited to see blue decks get played more. Right now, Force is like the only realistically good blue deck, and it kind of is my jam, but I don't have it built, and I don't want to build it. Not because I don't think it's good, but just because it's not the blue deck for me. And that's why I'm like super excited for BT13. BT13 cannot come sooner. I just want to get out of this funk and into the next format, so that way I have more possibilities of different decks. It's a different meta, and I get my good boy, the Gao deck, and that is going to be something I am looking forward to. Not only as a dog lover, but as a blue lover, like a blue player, mainly blue player. That deck just appeals to me. So, but it's not like EX. It's not like this is that bad.
Yeah,
I've been through worse.
Yeah, yeah. I think even in just this game, we've been through worse, and then going even further back, like if in other card games, I've definitely played a lot worse metas than this. So I'm not going to complain too much. And I will always try to be positive when it comes to this, just because there's light at the end of the tunnel. There always is something to look forward to. And I personally am having fun. So as long as you can make your fun where you get it, you should be fine. And just don't take these things so seriously. At the end of the day, this is a game. At the end, if you're not enjoying it, then stop playing and try something different, or take a break, come back. If you don't like this format, there are plenty of alternatives than just slamming your face into this thing and just trying to continuously play it and then not have fun doing it. If you're not having fun, take a break, take a step back, reevaluate, come back.
Yep.
If it is your prerogative to want to.
Yep, and you could always try finding your own fun. Like, I am running weekly events or, like, bi-weekly events. It kind of just determines on, like, what I actually have time for. Over on my Discord channel. So if you want to join my Discord, then feel free to do that. And the tournaments that I run are usually on Saturday nights, as of right now, subject to change. But right now, that just works within my schedule. And I just try to create a fun, relaxed environment for us to just casually jump in and play Digimon with a little bit of a tournament structure. And that's kind of where I've been having my fun, is just having a more relaxed environment to be able to test various different decks. Just because I am a YouTuber, I do a lot of deck building and a lot of deck testing. So sometimes I need different avenues to be able to test them. Most of the time I do it at my locals, but the more ways that I have to test various different things just allows me to do more. And that's where my enjoyment is out of the game, is just trying to help other people, give them more ways to play, give them more ideas to bounce off of, more information to have. And if you're not having fun with this format, like Teddy said, feel free to take a break, come back when you think you're ready to. The game's hopefully not going to be going anywhere. It'll be waiting. And right now, it's just going to be a really interesting time until EX4 rolls around, and then that'll have a couple of shakeups, and then the next big one is going to be BT13 in July. But on that note, I want to thank everyone for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed this episode and you want to support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. Depending on your platform of podcast, make sure to follow, subscribe, like, do all those different social media things. And then, again, I want to thank everyone for listening, and I will see you in the next episode.